The sky above the capital sector of Aethelgard was burning, not with fire but with the violent violet light of a containment breach. Jarek Thorne shielded his eyes, the heat blistering against his exposed skin as the shock waves rattled his very teeth. In his arms, Eliana was flickering, her physical form destabilizing as the cosmic wardens tried to recall her to the prism. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of sirens and tearing atmosphere, but the only sound that mattered was the erratic thrum of her pulse against his chest. Infinite power traded for a single heartbeat. That was the choice before him. The Warden General leveled a suppression cannon at them, demanding the relic that controlled her. Jarek looked down at Eliana. Her eyes, usually holding the calm of a nebula, were wide with a terrified realization of her own mortality. She wasn't a weapon anymore. She was the only thing that made sense in a galaxy gone mad. He tightened his grip on the glowing crystal in his palm, feeling its edges bite into his skin. He didn't brace for impact. He braced to make the most dangerous wish of all. 12 hours earlier there was no fire, only the relentless sun-bleached expanse of the barrens of Xylos. Jarek wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of pale dust across his forehead. His transport, a battered skirmisher-class hauler, hissed steam from a cracked manifold. He wasn't looking for trouble or ancient destinies. He was looking for a replacement coupler in the wreckage of a crashed freighter. The barrens were bright, unforgiving and silent, a graveyard of ships that had flown too close to the ion storms. He saw the glint first. It wasn't the dull reflection of oxidized hull plating, but a sharp, prismatic flash that cut through the midday glare. Buried beneath a sheet of twisted titanium lay a crystalline relic, pulsing with a rhythm that felt disturbingly alive. Jarek reached out, his gloves trembling slightly. The moment his fingers grazed the surface, the crystal dissolved into a stream of pure luminescence. The light didn't scatter. It coalesced. It pulled together with violent speed, forming limbs, a torso, and finally, a face that looked like it had been carved from starlight. Eliana hovered inches above the scorched ground. The air around her cooled instantly, the heat of Xylos retreating before her presence. She opened her eyes, and Jarek felt the breath leave his lungs. It wasn't just beauty, it was gravity. She looked at him with an intensity that stripped him bare, scanning his biosignature, his thread level, his soul. "I await your command, operator," she said, her voice echoing inside his mind rather than vibrating the air. The tone was hollow, devoid of the self, a vessel waiting to be filled with purpose. Jarek stumbled back, his boots crunching on the gravel. He had expected a weapon or a power source, not a woman who looked at him like he held the leash to her existence. He looked at the emptiness in her expression, the way she stood perfectly still, waiting for an order to define her. "I don't have a command," Jarek said, his voice rough from the dry air. He reached into his pack and pulled out a water canister, instinctively offering it to her. "I have water. You look thirsty." Eliana tilted her head, the perfect symmetry of her stance breaking. The concept seemed alien to her. She looked the stars as a map, a grid of coordinates and conquest, but he was teaching her to see the space between them. She took the canister, her fingers brushing his. The contact wasn't cold. It was electric, a sudden, sharp jolt that snapped between them like a static discharge. She didn't drink. She stared at the water, then at him. "You were the first to offer sustenance before demanding a conquest," she whispered. "Identity is built through choices, not predetermined functions." In that small, dusty silence, Jarek realized he wasn't looking at a tool. He was looking at someone who had never been allowed to be anyone. And for the first time in his life, the solitude of the barrens felt insufficient. He didn't want to be alone anymore, and looking at the confusion dawning in her eyes, he knew she was terrified of the same thing. The memory of that water cool, simple and given without a price vanished into the searing heat of the capital. The Warden General didn't wait. The suppression cannon whined, a high-pitched scream of charging energy. Eliana moved faster than thought, her body blurring into a streak of starlight to shield Jarek, but he tackled her to the Duracrete, covering her body with his own. The blast tore through the space where they had stood a microsecond before, vaporizing a statue of the Grand Admiral. Debris rained down like molten hail. Jarek gritted his teeth, feeling the heat radiate through his jacket. Ileana wasn't fighting back. She was trembling, waiting for him to direct her rage, to point her at the enemy like the weapon she was designed to be. "Command her," the general roared, his voice amplified by the mech suit speakers. "Command her to yield, and the sector is yours. Infinite wealth, a fleet of your own. Just speak the words." Jarek looked down at her. In the chaos of the burning city, with the smell of ozone and pulverized stone choking the air, he saw only her. She was terrified, not of dying, but of being used again, of being a tool for another man's war. He gripped the crystal relic so hard his knuckles turned white. It pulsed, waiting for the wish that would rewrite reality. The temptation was a physical weight. He could end the fight instantly. He could be a king. But he remembered the lesson of the barons. Empathy and kindness are stronger legacies than conquered kingdoms. "I have a command," Jarek shouted, standing up and pulling Ileana with him. He held the crystal up to the burning sky. The general paused, the cannon dimming slightly in anticipation. "I wish," Jarek yelled, his voice cracking with the strain, "for the destruction of the contract. I wish for her freedom, not as a spirit, but as a living soul. I wish for her silence to be her own. The most dangerous wish is the one for someone else's happiness because it requires the total surrender of power." The crystal didn't just glow. It screamed. A shock wave of pure white light exploded from Jarek's hand, shattering the suppression cannons and blinding the sensors of the Warden fleet. It wasn't a weapon of war. It was the severance of chains. The relic disintegrated into dust, blowing away in the hot wind. Jarek fell to his knees, drained. He waited for the end, for the general's retaliation. But the silence that followed wasn't heavy or ominous. It was the stunned quiet of a battlefield that had lost its purpose. Ileana stood over him. The ethereal glow was gone. Her skin was flushed with blood, her chest heaving with the desperate, ragged intake of oxygen. She looked at her hands, solid and imperfect, then at the confused soldiers lowering their weapons. She didn't vaporize them. She simply turned her back on them and knelt beside Jarek, gripping his hand with a strength that was entirely human. The soil of Viridia was rich, dark, and smelled of rain, a sharp contrast to the sterile dust of Xylos. 2 years later, the galaxy had moved on, forgetting the warlords and the relic. High on a hillside, overlooking a valley of sprawling greens and winding rivers, Jarek hammered a post into the ground. His hands were rougher now, calloused from labor rather than flight controls. Ileana walked up the path, carrying a basket of harvest fruit. She no longer floated. She walked, her boots leaving deep prints in the soft earth. She paused to look up at the night sky. The stars were beginning to emerge, vast and indifferent. "Do you miss it?" Jarek asked, leaning on his hammer. "The power?" Ileana looked from the stars to the small, warm lights of their cabin. She took a bite of a sun-warmed pear, juice running down her chin, a sensation she chose, a moment she owned. She smiled, and it was a radiant, blinding thing. True freedom is found in the autonomy of daily life, not just the absence of chains. "I don't miss being a map," she said, interlacing her fingers with his. "I prefer being home,